Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustavson and Barry Smith.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm Paul Gustavson, and joining me is my co-host, Barry Smith. Hey, Barry, how are you, man?
Doing well, my friend. Good to be on here today with you.
It's great to see you. I sure enjoyed our episode that we did last week. Fantastic on becoming something more. And we're going to keep building on that. I can't wait to get into the discussion today on equipping yourself. So when you think of the word equipping, and we're going to dive into it in a minute, but what kind of pops for you?
I think for me, again, coming from 30 years in construction, always wanted to have the right resources. And so when we bring up this topic of equipping, what do you got in your toolbox? What resources do you have available to you to use now? What resources do you need? And it's not only for yourself, but to help and add value to others. I think you and I, knowledge is a big one. Do we have quotes? Do we have bullet points? Can we speak into, questions that somebody we're trying to serve may have? And so what tools do we have into our toolbox? I think last week, we pulled some quotes from Napoleon Hill. There's lots of great resources there that we can point people to, but really what's in your toolbox, and are you equipped to use those tools, right? It's one thing to have them, but are you equipped and qualified to be able to use them?
Yeah, it's so good. Equipping to me, I think back, and we're going to dive into more details and what we can do as individuals and leaders to equip ourselves. But think about, I think you were familiar with this. Maybe weren't you involved in the Boy Scouts at some time?
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like that was one of the elements to it that really intrigued me, was how they equipped young scouts, right? So I wasn't in the Cub Scouts, maybe a year or two. It wasn't until the Boy Scouts that I joined in and got the merit badges, and I became an Eagle Scout, man. I went all the way. I didn't go all the way because you can keep going. Once I got Eagle Scout, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready. But it was so powerful because I felt equipped. Yeah. There have been multiple moments, even now, in my mid-50s, where I realized that I was equipped as a Boy Scout to do some stuff. So if you're involved in Boy Scouts, anybody out there or listening or watching, kudos to you, right? And I'm not going to get into the history of Boy Scouts or all that. All I can tell you is this: be prepared is something that they believe in. It's important, equipping themselves. And that whole process of being equipped is something that we can do as whatever age we're at.
Yeah, I love this example, and props to you for getting your Eagle Scout award. My youngest son, Spencer's an Eagle Scout, and both my boys were in. I got interested in other stuff that didn't add as much value to me as scouting probably did, so I didn't make it quite that far. But being part of that, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and then being a leader for both my boys as they kind of went through that. Great example, and if you ask my boys what are some of their favorite memories from growing up, it's definitely our time up in the mountains hiking, 50-mile hikes, 60-mile hikes, a week of just being away from everything, basically living off what you have in your backpack, right? And setting up camp. I know one of them we didn't take tents. That was the whole kind of part of that, equipping them was to build your own shelter, so we're hiking through the Cascade Mountains on the West Coast, and they're building a shelter every night, and it was something that has allowed me to look at them now as grown adults and say they could pretty much take care of themselves in any situation. And as a dad, that's like a big deal, but it's something I've also watched them take into helping others. And that's the proud part of it. The glad part is I know they're equipped. I know they can take care of themselves, but they've also taken those skills and gifts and abilities and brought those into helping others. And I think that is just a great example. I didn't know you were going to play the Boy Scout card. on the call here today. So love it, man. Great example of equipping.
Yeah, well, yeah, sometimes we don't know what we're going to share. And I didn't know that I was going to share anything about Boy Scouts either, but I realized that for me, I was equipped through that. Lots of different channels, lots of different ways to do it. And um, that was a powerful organization to equip me, that equipped me. And there's
Yeah.
other ones too. But it kind of comes down to mindset, doesn't it, though? When you think about equipping, right? So think about our mindset. If we're not prepared to be equipped, we talked about becoming something more, and now this next step is like, okay, well, if we're going to become something more, and we're going to take this journey, and we're going to step on the trail, and we're moving past the trailhead onto the trail through. You talked about the West Coast and some of the crazy, awesome, probably terrain there that I would love to go visit and spend some time in the Oregon Trail. But think about that. Once you get out there on the trail, you've got to make sure you're equipped for that hike initially.
Yeah.
I think that comes down to mindset. And Carol Dweck, she wrote a great book called Mindset, says that picture your brain forming new connections as you meet the challenges and learn, and then keep going. And so I like that because she brings out a couple points here, right? First, you're going to have new connections as you meet challenges and learn. And sometimes we look at the new connections that when we meet challenges, and when we think about the challenges, we're like, oh, I'm not sure I want to go down that trail. I'm not sure I'm equipped. How many people have told you, Barry, like, okay, I didn't move forward because I didn't know how.
Yeah. Yeah. Spot on.
Right. I didn't move forward because I didn't know how. And what was the quote that you shared to start the last podcast with?
So you've got to do something you've never done before in order to become someone you've never been before.
Yeah. And to me, that's like the ultimate equipping statement. That's a mantra for equipping yourself. Just step forward into it. It reminds me of there was a singer. His name is Charlie Peacock. Turns out that the line is actually A.W. Tozer. So you A.W. Tozer fans may recognize this. And the song was called Experience. It's from an album called The Secret of Time. So if you're an audiophile, go Google that. Charlie Peacock, The Secret of Time, and the song Experience. And he says this: you can only possess what you experience. Truth to be understood must be lived. And that was a powerful statement for me when I was probably 23, 24 years old. And it made me realize that I wanted to be in my comfort zone, but if I stayed in my comfort zone, I was going to get uncomfortable after a while, because I was just going to, where was I going to go? I needed to step forward. And that allowed me, that statement, that thought about, you know what, knowledge is power. Yes, but no, it's not just knowing something, it's actually applying it where I actually learn it and understand it, and taking that step forward and doing it. And I was able to do some things that I never thought I could, because why? I realized, well, you don't know till you try. Let me just go out there and find out. Let me experience it. Let me understand what it means to do this. And whether it was speaking, because I was a little bit of a reluctant speaker at that time. And I remember multiple times I volunteered. I was a little guy in the back. I'll do it. I'll do it. And I was scared to death. But I knew that if I stepped forward in it, I was going to learn from it. I was going to meet that challenge and learn, just like Carol Dweck talks about. So, anyway, thoughts on that?
Well, in first place, I don't know when you were ever a little guy in the back of anything.
Yeah. Well, you feel like, hey, Barry, you feel like the little guy when you're brand new to a company.
Yeah.
Right. Every new environment. I was just in an experience the other day. I felt really awkward. Why? Because I didn't know anybody.
Mm.
And you feel like the little guy. You just want to find the wall and just kind of like, okay, I'll just watch. Right. But sometimes you just got to step forward. But yeah. So
now, as you were sharing that, a handful of times, a word that popped into my mind was confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't really made that connection till we started this conversation, like usually what happens with us, right? We go down a whole different direction we thought was coming at us. But this idea of equipping really building confidence, and I think it does. And I'll go back to scouts, because I think I got a great story here that will kind of paint this point I'm trying to make. So it was one of our 50-mile hikes. We were up on Mount Jefferson in Oregon, in the Oregon Cascades.
Yeah.
And we were about, I think, probably day 4, and the weather started turning on us. You look at the forecast, and we always try to make the best judgment on when we were going. But it's a Cascade Mountains. Things can change on a dime. And so there's day 4, we got some heavy rains, and everybody was wet. I mean, there's just no way around. You're hiking, you're going to get wet. And so we kind of took a break, and one of the adults got back on a shortwave radio, and we got out. We found out weather is turning, and it's getting worse. And we still had to go up over the top. I think the pass there was maybe pushing 9,000 feet, that we had at least 8. And so this was August, it's August, it's summer, but it's cold, as you know. I know you spent some time in elevation. Yeah. So we're like, we're going to bail. We got to go. This is not the place to keep, a dozen 14, 15, 16-year-old kids in these conditions. And so we kind of finished up. I think we ate lunch and headed out with the intent of getting up over the pass and to get it down the other side. So we get up to the top. It's about 36 degrees. It's snowing. It's totally fogged in clouds. And there was 4 adults and 12 kids on that trip. And we got separated with the conditions. We got separated into 3 groups. We were on a kind of a glacier area. So it was just white snow. So it was complete whiteout.
Yeah.
It's white on the ground, white in the air, white everywhere, and snowing and 36 degrees, and we're all wet. And so, you could just sense the panic, the urgency. I was with about 4 of the kids, and we all knew, here comes the point, right? We all had the confidence that we knew what the process was. Mm-hmm. Keep working downhill. We knew we hit the pass because we saw the sign. We knew we were on the trail when we were at the top, and we just kept working down that snow till we got down. And all 3 groups, because they had the confidence to keep going, they had the resources, they were equipped to make good decisions. We ended up, right where we were supposed to be on the trail, and it was about 2, maybe even 3 hours of some anxious thinking, especially for the adults who were responsible for these kids. But as we're talking about this, I realized it was not only the adults, but the kids who could have panicked, could have, who knows what could have happened. I mean, it was just the recipe for something going really wrong. And things go really wrong in the Cascades, in any mountains. But, a few prayers, I'm sure, were mixed in there as well. But I really believe it was the confidence and the equipping of everyone there that empowered us to get down to where we needed to be.
What's interesting is that when you endure something like that, your confidence actually increases even further.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So you go in there and you're a little bit, maybe the anxiety's kicking in. I'm sure it was. Yeah. And, there's questions about it, but there's an element of trust that you have, like, wait a minute, we didn't come this far only to come this far.
Right.
We've endured other things in the past. So you start pulling on that. Certainly faith is a big factor for a lot of folks. It certainly is for me, like you said, with prayers and all that. And you step forward and you realize, well, wait a minute, we're here together. We're not alone. We can do this. And when you endure that, the confidence, first of all, you are actually experiencing the confidence lift as you take action, which is good. And then you experience a second level of boost of confidence afterwards because you just endured it. You just did it. And it's pretty powerful. And so I love you sharing that.
No, and I think you made the main point that I picked up on, I think, in this is that's how the experiences are what really equips us. Because it's all that, processing, see what works, what doesn't. all those elements that go into it. Again, taking action is a key. But I think life in itself equips us if we choose to see the value in what we experience.
I agree. Now, I would say, as we talk about being equipped, ask yourself this question: how am I already equipped? Because I think, Barry, sometimes we need to go to Amazon Prime and we were just like, okay, well, we pack the suitcases double full, triple full, for the cruise trip, whatever we're doing. We think we're not equipped, and we go grab more. We run over to Target and okay, we'll load up more stuff. But wait a second, what if we're more equipped than we realize, and we just need to think through it? How are we already equipped? I think is really the key question that we should ask ourselves.
I love this. And I think it's because our awareness, again, noise and clutter. I'll probably mention that on every podcast somewhere in the mix. But I think we become so dependent on, I know you being a technology guy, you get it as much or more than anybody. What technology allows us to do. So what do? We get equipped by getting the latest tools, the latest gadgets, the latest gizmos. And I get it. A lot of the stuff, look what we're doing with the space program right now. And, it's amazing what we can do with the technology we have. So that's one resource, right? That's something you physically take and you put in your toolbox or your backpack. Where I think we've, as a whole, have been declining is equipping mentally.
Yes.
Because now we get dependent on all this other stuff, all these tools in our toolbox, and we've forgotten how to use our own mind. And it's almost like, well, I don't know what to do. Like, what do we do when the internet goes out?
Yeah.
We've been dealing with this today, right? Internet. So what do we do? Well, I don't know. And it's, the real equipping is like my story on a mountain. You got to be able to make those decisions when you don't have all that stuff in your toolbox. And so when we talk about, today's subject, for me, it's what do I bring in my mental toolbox?
Yeah, exactly. It's spot on. And we talked about the Boy Scouts and your sons going around, whatever lake it was in Oregon, camping without all the gear and learning like, wait a minute, I'm fully resourced. There's enough stuff around here for me to build a shelter and do the things that I'm doing. It's kind of the MacGyver mentality, right? There's stuff all around us. Yes. What can you do? It's mindset, guys. And so I think this is, and you and I are hitting the nail on the head on this. I think it's so important. I want to talk about something called the reticular activating system. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I first heard about this from a couple different sources, almost all at the same time. It was just amazing. And I remember I was training for a 10K and listening to Mark Batterson talk about Honai, who had a real imaginative prayer that was powerful, that brought rain to their country. And then he talked about the power of prayer, and I'm not going to get into prayer elements, but what he ended up talking about was how we're wired biologically. So independent upon your faith or your theology, the one thing is true: we're all human. We're all kind of made the same, right? In between our ears, we talked about the environment there and what we're doing as far as our imagination. Well, at the base of our skull lies this thing called the reticular activating system. And it's like a sensor system. And how we see things, how we identify what it is that we want and needs, and I'll give you a great example here in a second, activates this RAS. I call it the RAS, the reticular activating system. And we begin to see things like, wow, okay, I see something there. So the Boy Scouts, when they're camping, like we talked about earlier, and they don't have all the gear, but they're said, hey, go rustle up some sticks and some wood, find some sort of tarp or whatever, all of a sudden they've put things into their RAS, their shopping list, call it that, right, if you want. And they can find these things that they probably didn't even think they had. It's sort of the MacGyver mentality. And the RAS, I think, is really important if we program ourselves. And I know that seems like a strange term, but if we identify those things that we need to be able to accomplish what it is that we want to achieve, and realize that, man, there's some variables out there. There's some different variants of what I need to do this. Then those things become all of a sudden they become more apparent to us, and we figured it out. We find a way. And people use the RAS all the time. They don't realize it. But if you want, let's say you wanted a car, Barry. Let's say you wanted a dark blue pickup truck, right? Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And let's say you're like, well, I want a dark blue one because I don't see a lot of dark blue pickup trucks. And I want one with black alloy wheels. Yeah, that's a rare one. I want something that not everybody else has. Dark blue pickup truck, black alloy wheels. So you're driving one day, you see one on the parking lot, used car lot. There it is. It's a brand new one. It's sitting over there. Like, oh, wow, there it is. I'm going to go look at it. You look at it and you're like, yeah, this is the one. And before you know it, you're securing purchasing and you're buying the car, thinking that you've got a rare gem. Well, guess what happens the very next day?
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. What's happened? Did they just happen that overnight, all of a sudden, a bunch of dark blue pickup trucks with black alloy wheels popped up? No, it's your RAS. It's the reticular activating system. And just realizing how that works, boy, it makes a huge difference. So I'll let you kind of speak into that, but I think that's a powerful tool that we can leverage and use to our good and helping us become something more.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I love this. I don't know if you remember this, but I actually have a dark blue pickup.
No, I don't know that.
I don't have the black alloy wheels, but I'm sure now after this conversation, I'll be noticing that as well. I love this example because it's awareness, right? Yeah. I'm a big awareness guy because we miss so much in life just because I won't say noise and clutter again because I've already said it enough on this chat. But it's awareness. And so, activating system, forget about the reticular part, that's maybe freaking some people out a little bit, but that activating system, boom, that's what life is, and roll that back to equipping. Mm-hmm. Where's our awareness at? How are we equipping? What thoughts are we putting into our mind? What are we becoming observant of? And here's the other side of it, right? We can come in here and make some positive comments about equipping and then what are you going to be focused on and what actions are you going to take? But it also works negatively, so if you're filling your mind with a bunch of garbage, if you're hanging around with the wrong people, well, guess what? That's what you're attracted to. That's what you're going to be hanging around with. That's where you're going to be at. And this is where, I've just seen so many people in my life go down one trail or the other. And so what decision, again, equipping, what are you doing? Where are you shopping for your tools? Let me put it that way. Where are you shopping for your tools? Yeah. To equip you to go out and make a difference. And, going to last week's session, and tell me more. Yeah. You don't get the right tools. You don't get the tools. You don't get yourself equipped to do these things. You're not gonna.
Yeah, it's so good. Think about this, right? So if we don't get our RAS right, our reticular activating system, if we're not hanging around the right people, if we don't have our environment right, and we see it all the time, Barry. Let's be honest, guys. We see people who have. I'm gonna call it for what it is, Barry. It's a values issue, isn't it?
Don't get started on values.
Right? No, I mean it is, right? So if our values are off, if we're not clear on what we value, what do you really value? What do you really value? When you get your values right, boy, things kind of go right in the right direction. But if they're off, if our values aren't, we can't get to vision without values. You can't cast a vision unless your values are clear. What are your values? You can't have followers following you. They're not going to follow you based on your vision. As important as it is, it does say in the Bible, without the vision, the people will perish. Yes, it's important, but you can't get the vision without values. They follow you because they echo with your values. You and I we're both followers of John Maxwell. Why do we follow him? Values. So I'll let you speak into that because I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, buddy.
Well, I don't want to go deep into it because it's too much, right?
Yeah.
Values is that big. But I will say this, I was over in Europe last month, went through kind of a 2-day exercise built around values. And you talk about Raz, since I got back, this was 5 weeks ago. Since I got back, everybody is talking about values. Now, did that just change? I don't think so. But everybody, I mean, my clients, my peers, the gurus I listen to, everybody's talking about values. Yeah. And to your point of how important they are, I couldn't agree with you more. And to me, the word I would use is foundation.
Yeah.
Your values are your foundation. So again, how strong is the rest of the structure? In this case, you, right? You're the structure in this scenario. How strong is your foundation? Yeah. We all know the foundation stories.
Yeah, this is so good. All right, so let's get into a little bit of the why, and then we'll land the plane here. This is such a great conversation, guys, and we have the opportunity. We are more equipped than we realize, but how do we recognize how we're equipped? So I want to give at least an initial tool, and Barry, I want you to share what your thoughts are. Years ago, I came across something called the OODA loop, right? Sounds funny. OODA, like some kind of chant of some sort, but it stands for observe, orient, decide, act. And the gentleman that came up with this, 50 years after the Wright brothers invented flight, and we could talk about them, talk about finding a way to equip, right? How do you find airplane parts for something that's never been invented? Right? So we could have a conversation about the Wright brothers. It's and I'm sure we will over the course of the next few weeks, but think about that, right? So OODA, 50 years later, John Boyd, he's a jet pilot for the Air Force and ends up becoming an instructor and identifies really a strategic approach in terms of how the military, but it's not just for the military, it's for all of us, how we can equip ourselves and be able to step forward and being fully resourced and make a difference and make an impact. And it's called the OODA loop. Observe. So the first part, it's situational awareness. It's kind of Jason Bourne style, right? You observe and see what's around you, and you don't make any emotional decisions. You're just trying to be aware what's happening. What's my world like? Then you orient. Or like, okay, you orient because you do have you do have values and you do have a desire. We talked about Napoleon Hill's comment about desire is the starting point of all achievement. And so you begin to orient, think of it like pivoting, like in basketball, you would pivot a little bit to get ready to receive the ball if you're doing the low post. And you get ready. Now you haven't done a whole lot. You haven't really decided anything. You're just oriented to see what are the options that are there. And then you can start to make a decision. You're like, okay, now I know all the options. What are my decision points? What are the things that I should do, need to do, ought to do? Right. So now you identify the decisions that you have in front of you. And what's great about the OODA loop is that what once seemed overwhelming, because you began to identify and isolate down to the decisions that you have, the 2 or 3. And there's really never more than 2 or 3 decisions ever. All right. Once you have those decisions, then you get to act. The problem is, Barry, that most people get to the OOD and they don't get to the A. Right? They're like, okay, I know what I need to do. We'll do it. Right? Act. And I've struggled myself in this. Well, let's be honest. I think Barry and I, you'll find that we're fully transparent with you guys. Where I've struggled the most is not the observing, although sometimes I have. Like, I failed to see it. I failed to see the dirty dishes on the countertop. And my wife saw them. She says, how come you haven't cleaned your dishes? Oh, I didn't know I didn't see them. So I failed there in the observe, right? Orient, important. I think I'm fairly good at that. Decide. I can make some great decisions. But like Daniel Hammond once said a few months back, he cracked a joke. He said, 6 frogs were on a log, 5 decided to jump. How many are still left on the log? 6. Just because they decided didn't mean they jumped.
Yep.
You got to jump. You got to act. So OODA loop. So thoughts, again, I unpacked a little bit, but what do you think?
Well, we've definitely talked about this in the past, and I love the model. And so let me bring a simplifier into it. All right.
Yeah.
Filters.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that kind of struck me maybe just in the last year. Talk about equipping, what tools, what resources. Filters. How are you filtering your decisions? Just like you're saying, you get down to that decide, and then that's where we get stuck, right? We get to the ood.
Yeah.
And then there's no A. John Maxwell, greatest gap we'll ever face in life, gap between what we know and what we do. Mm-hmm. Right? And that what we do is what requires action. And so for me, it's become just filters. Does this move me closer? And kind of our theme for the last couple of weeks here, does this move me closer into who I want to become?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yep.
And the decision's easy. Right? So add whatever system. If you want to use the OODA loop, awesome. It's easier to use, and Paul, you did a great job kind of laying it out there, but don't be intimidated by the OODA loop, right? Thinking, oh my gosh, I can't handle something called the OODA loop. It's pretty straightforward. But filter any decision, whatever process you're using, use that filter of, is this decision going to move me closer to who I want to become? And you'll find decision-making process gets a little bit easier.
It does. Good stuff. There's so much we could pull on this, and I think we're going to unpack a lot of things that are related to what we're talking about today over the course of the next few weeks over season 5, guys. So we are so excited about this podcast. So if you're watching or listening, thank you. Feel free to visit us, guys, at the breakingaverage.com website. We would love to hear from you. You can find all sorts of resources that are out there, and certainly connect with Barry. You'll see a link that will have links for Barry and myself and other ways that you can connect with us. So appreciate you guys being a part of this. So Barry, let me just add one more thought, and then let's get to our tip and challenge. We kind of started the season off with this idea of our imagination. We talked about it last week about in between the ears and making sure we're clear on what we imagine, because if we don't get our imagination right, the narrative that we tell ourselves is going to keep us from taking action and making that step forward. But I want to encourage folks with action, right? So, and I love what you just shared. That was so good in the filters element, and the quote from John Maxwell, I thought that was solid. Think about the actions that we need to take. And so I would say to folks, and I'll let you kind of respond to your thoughts on this. I think we talked about hope and the importance of that, and never neglect that hope. What do you really hope for? And I think one thing that triggers hope for me is the word imagine. Right? Imagine one day. Imagine being able to. Imagine if you could. Imagine what it would be like. Imagine what it would be like. To me, imagine is like a power word, and it's a prompt to persevere. And I just want to encourage folks with that. Imagine activates hope for me. And I love how Aristotle says that hope is a waking dream. Powerful quote, right? Hope is a waking dream. So what is it that you hope for? What is it that you imagine? And allow yourself to leverage that, because maybe that gives you the filter, to use Barry's term, to step forward in terms of making those choices and decisions that you have. So just wanted to share that thought before we got to tip and challenge, but I'll let you respond to that. Any thoughts that you have?
I love that, Paul. Hope, a prompt to persevere. Love that. Never heard you state that way before. I wrote that down. Hold on. I might steal that from you.
Steal it away, man.
I think I love this conversation. I think the tip and challenge element of this to me is here's the tip, guys. And again, I'm pulling, many of us have been hanging around that John Maxwell guy for a number of years. Here's the tip. You cannot give what you do not have. Okay. And I know more than John Maxwell used that. I use it often. You cannot give what you do not have. And so here's my challenge to you. Really think into where you're shopping. I love my little line earlier about where you're shopping for your tools.
Yeah.
But think about that. Where are you shopping for your tools? How are you equipping yourselves? What resources are you going out and getting? Again, it takes action. But where are you shopping tools? Challenge over the next 5 weeks. Go get some new tools and figure out what you're going to do with them. Not what you can do with them, but what you're going to do with them. Go get some new tools. Equip yourself to a higher level.
I love it. Yep. And I would say this just so that you guys get the full, see what's already in your basket. All right. See what you already have.
Yeah, good point.
See what's there. And I think a lot of times, at least for me, let's be honest, it's like, well, I don't have this. I don't have that. I need this tool. I need that tool. Well, wait a minute. Okay, cool. Yeah, you might need that tool. But what tools do you already have? Maybe you already have the duct tape and the pocket knife. That's all you need. What can you do with what you have? So I just want to encourage you guys that maybe, just maybe, you're more equipped than you realized, and you just got to step forward with what you have. And then you become even more equipped because you've learned how to leverage and use what you have. So it's not always having the tool. I've got some great tools in my shed downstairs. I got a couple tools that I probably have never used. Why? I don't know why. It's because I'm like, I need somebody to show me. And if it's a tool that you kind of have, but you don't use, maybe there's somebody you can reach out and say, hey, look, I've seen you make an impact in this way, and I just need to learn how to use my tool. So ask for help. Don't go solo. Nobody ever climbs a mountain by themselves. If they do, they don't come back. They don't come back.
Exactly.
So go out there, find others with you, step forward together. Maybe you can go further, a whole lot further, with somebody else than alone. That's my tip and challenge. So Barry, man, I've enjoyed this. Any final takes before we close it out?
Oh, just love the way this played out today. You and I just have a lot of fun, just letting it run, right?
Yep.
I think that's, again, I guess the final word for me is just that awareness. I mean, our conversation today is an example of, what comes out of two or more people gathered together, right? You get that third mind. And I think you and I, historically, not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think we've done a pretty good job of being that third mind, that third perspective of what's possible out there. When you talk about the topic of equipping, you gotta have some additional people in on that. You just simply can't equip yourself. Doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Doesn't work that way. So great stuff as always, my brother.
Yep. I've enjoyed it. So guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to the Breaking Average podcast. We just love what we get to do. We challenge you to take that next step. Don't settle for average. Break average. Go make a difference. Add value to other people. Go stretch yourself. Get out of your comfort zone. Make a difference. And realize that you are more than equipped. You are ready. So join us next time for another episode of the Breaking Average podcast.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.